Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. So good evening, everyone. Hare Krishna. So very happy to be here with all of you this evening, celebrating Rama Navami, the appearance day of Ramchandra. I'll just read from the Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto, chapter 7, scheduled incarnations, text 23. So if everybody could please repeat after me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so I'll just read the Sanskrit and then the translation, English translation. Asmat prasada sumukha kalaya kalesha ikshvaku vamsha avatirya guru nideshe tishtan vanam sadayatanuja avivesha yasmin virudya dasha kandara artim archat. Translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Due to His causeless mercy upon all living entities within the universe, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, along with His planetary extensions, appeared in the family of Maharaj Ikshvaku as the Lord of His internal potency, Sita. Under the order of his father, Maharaj Dasharatha, he entered the forest and lived there for considerable years with his wife and younger brother. Ravana, who was very materially powerful, with 10 heads on his shoulders, committed a great offense against him and was thus ultimately vanquished. Purport. Lord Ram is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and his brothers, namely Bharat, Lakshman, and Shatrughna, are his plenary expansions. All 4 brothers are Vishnu Tattva and were never ordinary human beings. There are many unscrupulous and ignorant commentators on Ramayana who present the younger brothers of Lord Ramchandra as ordinary living entities. But here, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the most authentic scripture on the science of Godhead, it is clearly stated that his brothers were his plenary expansions. Originally, Lord Ramchandra is the incarnation of Vasudeva. Lakshman is the incarnation of Sankarshan. Bharat is the incarnation of Pradyumna, and Shatrughna is the incarnation of Aniruddha. Expansions of the personality of Godhead. Lakshmiji Sita is the internal potency of the Lord and is neither an ordinary woman nor the external potency incarnation of Durga. Durga is the external potency of the Lord, and she is associated with Lord Shiva. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, text 7, the Lord appears when there are discrepancies in the discharge of factual religion. Lord Ramchandra also appeared under the same circumstances, accompanied by his brothers, who are expansions of the Lord's internal potency, and by Lakshmiji, Sita Devi. Lord Ramchandra was ordered by his father, Maharaj Dasharatha, to leave home for the forest under awkward circumstances. And the Lord, as the ideal son of his father, carried out the order, even on the occasion of his being declared the king of Ayodhya. One of his younger brothers, Lakshmanji, desired to go with him, and so also his eternal wife, Sitaji, desired to go with him. The Lord agreed to both of them, and altogether they entered the Dandakaranya forest, to live there for 14 years. During their stay in the forest, there was some quarrel between Ramchandra and Ravana, and the latter kidnapped the Lord's wife, Sita. The quarrel ended in the vanquishing of the greatly powerful Ravana, along with all his kingdom and family. Sita is Lakshmiji, or the goddess of fortune, but she is never to be enjoyed by any living being. She is meant for being worshipped by the living being along with her husband, Sri Ramchandra. A materialistic man like Ravana does not understand this great truth, but on the contrary he wants to snatch Sita Devi from the custody of Ram, and thus incurs great miseries. The materialists who are after opulence and material prosperity may take lessons from Ramayana, that the policy of exploiting the nature of the Lord without acknowledging the supremacy of the Supreme Lord is the policy of Ravana. Ravana was very advanced materially, so much so that he turned his kingdom Lanka into pure gold, or full material wealth. But because he did not recognize the supremacy of Lord Ramchandra and defied him by stealing his wife, Sita, Ravana was killed, and all his opulence and power were destroyed. Lord Ramchandra is a full incarnation with 6 opulences in full, and he is therefore mentioned in this verse as Kaleshaha, or master of all opulence. Om Ganatividandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshulan Militabena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Kativa Chalam Pangam Langai Tegirim Yak Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurundinitanam Bancha Kapadaruvisha Kripasindabevacha Patitanam Pavaniyabil Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhanitananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, as Srila Prabhupada was mentioned in the purport that we just read, Ramchandra, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he was banished to the forest for 14 years. And his wife, Sita, and his brother, Lakshman, went with him, Ramchandra, to the forest. And there, reading Ramayana, or hearing about Ramayana, or hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam describing Lord Ramchandra's pastimes or activities, we'll see that at one point, I'm seeing myself on the screen out there, and not only am I seeing myself, but I'm hearing myself. Okay. I think it's a little loud, but anyway. So Ravana, so while living in the forest, Sita, Ramchandra, Lakshman, and one particular time during their stay there in the forest, a great demoniac personality, demon or really evil person came by the name of Ravana. And what did he try to do? And what did he do? He stole Sita, right? And while so he managed to get Sita, and then he was flying off in his mystic chariot that was led by mules, actually. Anyways, flying in the sky with Sita, goddess of fortune, and she was calling out. I mean, naturally, right? Anybody who's kidnapped or in danger, they call out, right? Help, help. So she was calling out, and she was hoping Ramchandra, Lakshman would hear her, but they didn't because they were too far away. So then she's calling out, and then all of a sudden somebody hears, and that is this devotee named Jatayu, who happens to be a vulture. So he was in he was a bird, but he was in a nearby tree, and he heard Sita, and then he saw what was happening. He saw Ravana in his mystic chariot with Sita, right? And he understood that, obviously this is not right. I mean, Ravana should not have Sita. So he thought to himself, okay, I need to stop this. But he was an older bird. He's been around for a while. And although he engaged in so many battles, and he was very strong and powerful, but he was old. So he was but he thought, okay, let me try. So then Sita, she understood what Jatayu was thinking, what he was about to do. So she told Jatayu that you're no real match for Ravana. Just please go tell Ramchandra, that Ravana has me, and this way give him a message. So then what Jatayu did is he was thinking to himself that, okay, well, how can I just let Sita be kidnapped by this? How can I allow this? How can I not stop it? So he tried to stop it in different ways. First, he started chiding Ravana and saying, right, who do you think you are? And you're stealing Sita. This is a married woman, and so on. But he wasn't listening. Said he was like the personification of lust. So he didn't understand these different moral instructions. So then Jatayu, he realized that, okay, this isn't going to work. This trying to explain to him, trying to give him moral instructions isn't going to work. So then what he did is he attacked Ravana with his claws. it says that I think he even managed to, he managed to lop off one of Ravana's arms. But then it says that Ravana had a benediction from Lord Brahma that whatever limb that was cut off, it would grow right back. So, cut off a limb, but it grew right back. But he was trying. He was attacking him. So, because he was a seasoned fighter, Jatayu, he thought to himself, okay, well, let me destroy the vehicle in which he is riding in, chariot. So that's what he did. Killed the mules, destroyed the chariot, and then Ravana was on the ground. So they were going back and forth fighting. But then, because Ravana was much younger, and again Jatayu was an old bird at the time, he was starting to get tired. So then what happened is Ravana, he cut off one of the wings of Jatayu, and then he cut off the other one. So then he was laying there, right, in his last moments, Jatayu. And then Ravana grabbed Sita by the hair, and, with a big roar, he just, through his mystic power, just went into the sky and left. So Jatayu was there, and he was chanting, Ram, 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 chanting, remembering Lord Ramchandra, his worshipful Lord, getting ready to die. So then all of a sudden Ramchandra comes, looking for Sita, and then he sees this entity there, and he's all mutilated, right, and suffering there, and it looks like he's about to die. But Ramchandra, he doesn't recognize him. So he actually pulls out a bow, because he's thinking maybe this is the person who kidnapped Sita. But Jatayu was chanting Ram, Ram, Ram. And then eventually Ramchandra, he appeared. He realized who it was. It was Jatayu. So then he embraced him. Ramchandra embraced Jatayu, his great devotee. And then Jatayu, while looking at Ramchandra, he told Ramchandra that Sita wanted to tell me a message, that she was kidnapped by Ravana, and they went to Lanka. So Jatayu told Ramchandra that, and then while looking at Ramchandra, he left his body, and it said that that Ramchandra, he did the rites, right, the funeral rites. So then now Sita, she is kidnapped and under Ravana's in Lanka, and eventually, right, Hanuman, one of the great heroes of the Ramayana, he goes on a long search to find Sita, eventually finds her. And then Ramchandra and his monkey soldiers and other soldiers, right, they are getting ready to cross the ocean to get Sita back, to attack Ravana and his followers. So the next verse describes that, text 24, so I'll just read that. So here it is. The personality of Godhead, Ramchandra, being aggrieved for his distant, intimate friend, Sita, glanced over the city of the enemy Ravana with red-hot eyes like those of Hara, who wanted to burn the kingdom of heaven. The great ocean, trembling in fear, gave him his way because its family members, the aquatics, like the sharks, snakes, and crocodiles, were being burnt by the heat of the angry, red-hot eyes of the Lord. So it says Ramchandra was requesting the ocean to give way, let us cross. And the ocean, trembling in fear, gave way to him. And why is that? Because the aquatics and all these different entities within the ocean started feeling the heat of Ramchandra's eyes because he was so angry. So starting to boil. He was boiling in the ocean. And one thing to note about this is that different people, they have different concepts of God. Some people think that God is impersonal. In the Bhagavatam, the Srimad Bhagavatam says that there's three aspects to the absolute truth. Vadanti tat vidas tattvam yagyanam advyam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabhyate. So there's three aspects. One is God, or Krishna, within everybody's hearts, all living entities' hearts. The other is the impersonal aspect, this effulgence coming from the body of Krishna. And the other is the person Krishna. So ultimately, Krishna is a person, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in other words, he has emotions, he has feelings, he has likes, he has dislikes. He's a person. Just as all of us in this room, we have likes and dislikes and emotions. So just as Krishna is a person, the devotees are also persons. Means, So we're not, the goal isn't impersonal. And therefore, we see here in this particular verse, it talks about anger. Has anybody ever felt anger before in this room? I think everybody has. Yes, okay. Govinda has raised his hand. You felt anger today towards your brother, huh? Maybe. So it's a natural emotion. So just as we feel anger sometimes, Krishna also feels anger sometimes. And interesting enough, Srila Prabhupada one time, he was in India, and one young man came up to him and he said, "Oh, Swamiji, when the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita are distributed throughout the whole entire world, then there'll be no more anger." And then Srila Prabhupada said, "What's wrong with anger?" He said, "Krishna spoke the whole Bhagavad Gita just to make Arjuna angry, so he would fight." Because there is, every emotion can be engaged in a Krishna conscious way or God conscious way. So anger also, right? Arjuna, he was fighting the bad guys, you could say, evil side. And therefore to fight, there has to be anger. So Ramchandra was angry, and therefore, right, his vision was boiling the ocean. All the aquatics were feeling the heat. But also we have another great person now in the Ramayana who was also angry, Hanuman. Hanuman was also very angry that this rascal Ravana kidnapped Sita. Who does he think he is? And we're going to go there and, right, teach him a lesson. So here, in this particular verse, they are on the India subcontinent, right? And they're looking over the ocean into Lanka, where they're about to go. So eventually, there's a whole process. They build a bridge there. They build a bridge to cross over to Lanka with boulders. Now, one thing Prabhupada mentions in a purport describing this is that someone would say, well, that's quite magical or mystical, or, you expect me to believe floating boulders and cross the ocean, make a bridge. So Prabhupada mentions in a purport describing this is that, yes, it's amazing, that's true. It's quite amazing. But one thing that's also amazing is that this Earth and so many other planets are also floating. It's quite mystical, right? Floating by the mystic power of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So some of the boulders were floating. And then they crossed over to Lanka. But before they were crossing, it was a whole process. The Hanuman and his different soldiers were throwing boulders in. And there was also one squirrel, little tiny squirrel. You can imagine how small the squirrel looked in comparison to Hanuman. Very small squirrel. Of course, this was a different age. I'm not exactly sure how big Hanuman was or the squirrel was, but anyways, smaller than, yeah. So Hanuman was throwing these big boulders, and then this little squirrel was doing his part, right? Just throwing little grains of sand into the ocean and trying to help make the bridge to cross. So then Hanuman he says, please move aside. I'm throwing these big boulders, and move aside, and you're kind of in the way, right? And then Ramchandra, he overhears this, and he tells Hanuman that, well, just as you're throwing these big boulders, you're doing your part. This is what you could do. This is within your capacity. Similarly, this squirrel is also working according to his capacity, which is not as big as yours, but he's working according to his capacity. So I'm accepting his service as well. And, right, Ramchandra says, and don't forget that I'm the one who's making the boulders float, my ability. So whatever our capacity is to serve Krishna, to serve Ramchandra, he accepts it. Just like someone may have, and there's also a saying, Krishna doesn't see what you give, but he sees what you hold back. It's a saying. Now, for example, someone may have $10,000 and they give $5,000 to Krishna. Right? Now, another person, they may have $10 million and they give $5,000 to Krishna. It's a little disproportionate. So in other words, we should give as much as we can. So Hanuman was given as much as he can, and that squirrel was given as much as he can. So we should give as much as we can. We shouldn't hold back. I mean, we can hold back, but if we hold back, it's like it's not in our best interest, actually. Because, for example, the idea, or within the Srimad Bhagavatam and other scriptures, is that we're eternal servants of Krishna. Jiva Hoy Krishna Nityadas, we're eternal servants of Krishna, and therefore, or Mamaivam Sho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, we're all part and parcels of Krishna. So by serving Krishna, we become satisfied. So if we're at all not feeling satisfied, we can try to give more to Krishna. So in other words, if we hold back in giving to Krishna or giving to Ramchandra, then that means mixed happiness. That's what we get. In other words, we get cheated. Shishi Garnitai ki jai. Shishi Adagiri ki jai. Jagannath Baldev Subhadra Maharani ki jai. So, Hanuman, he's a perfect example of somebody who is just fully absorbed in Ramchandra and Sita, Lakshman. And there's a famous picture that I'm sure many of you have seen of Hanuman. Famous picture of Hanuman. And Hanuman, what is he doing? He's ripping open his chest, and who's there? Ramchandra, Lakshman, Sita, they're there. That's who's in his heart. So it's in our. That's the thing. As living entities, we are interested in working or acting in such a way for our own self-interest. That's what everybody's doing in this world. But according to their conception, they have different conceptions of what their self-interest is. So the Bhagavatam's, the 7th canto says, Nate Vitu Swarta Gatim Hi Vishnu. So that the real goal is Krishna or Vishnu. And by engaging in Krishna's service, that's actually our real self-interest. That's what benefits us. But people, due to being in an illusion or to being too attached to material opulence, Bhogeshvara Prasaktanam Tayaparita Chetasam, the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, those who are too addicted or attached to material opulence, the resolute determination for Krishna conscious or devotional service doesn't take place. So in the 7th canto, the real goal is Krishna, but people think that they have so many external goals. So many external goals. And we may have external goals, right? Okay, I'm going to school and I want to become a professor. Or I am on and on and on. There's so many goals. And those may be acted on in Krishna consciousness, but we shouldn't forget the ultimate goal, which is Krishna Prem, or for the devotees of Ramchandra, Ramchandra Prem. So yes, Ramchandra accepted the squirrel service, Hanuman service, and then eventually they made their way over to Lanka, city of gold. Must be quite an amusing sight to see a city of gold, Ravana's kingdom. So then the next verse describes that, so we'll read that. When Ravana was engaged in the battle, so they made their way over and they're engaged in battle. Which, by the way, if anyone doesn't have Ramayana, should get it. There's many editions of Ramayana. There's so many editions. And some of them, as Prabhupada said in the previous purport, he says there's many unscrupulous or people have misconceptions who comment on the Ramayana or translate it. So Srila Prabhupada recommends Valmiki, the Valmiki Ramayana, which His Holiness Bhaktivedanta Swami has a very nice study, a summary study of that, so available. So anyways, here, when Ravana was engaged in the battle, the trunk of the elephant which carried the king of heaven, Indra, broke in pieces, having collided with the chest of Ravana, and the scattered broken parts illuminated all directions. Ravana therefore felt proud of his prowess and began to loiter in the midst of the fighting soldiers, thinking himself the conqueror of all directions. So he is extremely proud and extremely arrogant, puffed up, Ravana. He's thinking in the midst of the battle between Ramchandra and all the soldiers, and they're going back and forth, and he starts to think, I'm so great. I'm so powerful. I'm the conqueror of all directions. Which, in some ways, I mean, he did conquer a lot, so I mean, but still, it was all based on illusion. His pride. So he began to loiter in the midst of the fighting soldiers, thinking himself the conqueror of all directions. But his laughter, so he was laughing. But his laughter, overtaken by joy, along with the very air of his life, suddenly ceased with the tingling sound of the bow of Ramchandra, the personality of Godhead. So he was finished. Purport: however powerful a living being may be, when he is condemned by God, no one can save him. And similarly, however weak one may be, if he is protected by the Lord, no one can annihilate him. So, big battle happened, and eventually Ramchandra, he shot his shot an arrow, and it pierced the heart of Ravana and killed him. So on days like this, it's Ramchandra's appearance day. There's so many festivals throughout the year that we celebrate here at the temple and throughout the world. So there are days that we are meant to try to absorb ourselves. That's one of the nice things about giving class, is that you have to study and think about it and meditate on it. So that's why I appreciate giving class, but one of the reasons. But there's so many, like we're discussing now, some points within the pastimes of Ramchandra. The Srimad Bhagavatam, this book, which Srila Prabhupada said he wanted every gentleman and lady to have a set in their house. So if you don't have one, you should get one. We have them here. We have Hindi, we have Gujarati, we have English, Espanol, so many languages. So in the 9th canto of this book, Srimad Bhagavatam, there's 2 chapters which describes Ramchandra's life and pastimes. And the 2nd canto, which we're reading from now, is a summary. So on these days, we're meant to absorb ourselves in these topics, and also try to celebrate them. Actually, it's and life is actually that's what life's actually meant for. I mean, people have this conception that, okay, I like to party, I like to celebrate, I like to have a good time, which is natural. But the way in which people celebrate and try to have a good time is just not the best. So the celebrations that are engaged in Krishna consciousness, they are extremely uplifting and powerful, such these days. And actually, every day is supposed to be a celebration in Krishna consciousness. So we don't. It's not just like, okay, I celebrate when it's my birthday, or celebrate when it's somebody else's birthday, or I celebrate on Christmas or something like that. It's every day is supposed to be a celebration, according to Srila Prabhupada, which he said one time. He was in India. Many of his young disciples were there, about 20 of them. In the early days, Srila Prabhupada, he came to America, and then he went back to start his mission in India. And then they were at one gentleman's estate, and this Indian man, he said to the disciples of Srila Prabhupada that, oh, today it's a holiday. And the disciples, they just wanted to check with Srila Prabhupada and make sure. I mean, their guru's there, and they wanted to see what this man was talking about. So then they asked Srila Prabhupada, oh, Srila Prabhupada, is today a holiday? And then Prabhupada said, well, we're Vaishnavas, we're devotees of Krishna. So he said every day is a holiday. Every day we're meant to celebrate in Krishna consciousness. So, of course, these days are special. But again, every day can be special in Krishna consciousness, provided we apply what we have, our mind, right, thinking of Krishna, or Ramchandra Manmana Bhavamad Bhakto. Our words, our activities, we try to engage everything in Krishna consciousness, and in this way, it could actually be a celebration. Or else, it's kind of like a imitation celebration, or kind of a cheap Mickey Mouse type of celebration. how long can you stay at Disneyland? 1 day, 2 day, 3 I don't know, maybe there's some record how long someone has stayed at Disneyland or something. I'm not sure, but which is a kind of a spooky fact about Disneyland I heard the other day, just on a side note. Apparently, because it is quote unquote the happiest place in the world, can't stay there for too long, but it's the most happiest place in the world. And apparently what people do is when in their will, they say, oh, I want to be cremated. I want my body to be cremated. Right? Some people say that. And then they also say, and I want you to take my ashes of my body and drop them in Disneyland. Yeah, it's very common actually. Because it's the happiest place in the world, so hey, let me, drop my ashes there. So, like in Orlando, they have there's some boat ferry that goes across some water, yeah. And people do that. They go on the boat and they just, dump the ashes. So it's just full of ashes. So it's quite common. Also, they do it in some type of rides. For some reason, they drop them off in some ride too. So, anyways, So I mean, how long can someone enjoy at Disneyland, or how long can someone try to enjoy materially, or how much can they enjoy materially? I mean, Ravana tried; he's a good example. Didn't really work out for him so well, but in Krishna consciousness, one could fully enjoy because they're in connection with the Supreme Absolute Truth, Krishna, who is the reservoir of all pleasure. So, all right. So, does anybody have any questions or comments about anything? Yes. I think we may have a mic to pass to. At least we should have a mic. Do you have the mic, Kanai? Can you grab the mic? Anyways, you could say it. I could repeat it too.
Thanks for explaining the concept that any one of the emotions, including anger, can be causing my question was that we as individuals may not be poised to be able to control the.
Control the.
So should an individual focus on certain emotions that best help them advance career, or really doesn't matter what emotion?
Okay. So the question is, I was mentioning, he was saying he appreciates how I mentioned that idea of different emotions being engaged in Krishna consciousness, such as anger. And he was saying that sometimes we may not be, you said like equipoise enough to use? Same level of control of certain emotions, and we're trying to engage those emotions in Krishna consciousness. So you're saying, are there ones that are better? For what? Depending on yes, okay. All right. Well, by the practice of Krishna consciousness, all good qualities manifest. There's 26 qualities of a devotee mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And also in the third canto of the Bhagavatam, Kapiladev says, right, Titikshva, Karunika, that there's tolerance, mercy, different qualities that manifest. So, and generally everybody could appreciate those qualities, right? Oh, they're very tolerant or so on. So generally all the qualities that manifest in Krishna consciousness, yeah, people could appreciate. Now there's some, like Srila Prabhupada would get very angry sometimes, but it was in Krishna consciousness. For example, he would get very angry that people were trying to mutilate Krishna, or trying to, what's that? Not depersonate? That's not a word, huh? Maybe impersonate. Devalue, diminish. Right? Krishna, because Krishna's a person, right? Shama Sundar, he has lotus eyes and plays a flute and so on. She's a person. It's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So some people would say, oh, well, it's not. Okay, it says that someplace in the Bhagavad Gita or someplace here and there, but it's actually not really true. Some people may say that. Some people do say that ultimately God's just impersonal. There's no personhood. So upon hearing that, Srila Prabhupada would get very upset, get very angry, and he said, no, it's like, for example, I'll give you an example. One time in 26 2nd Avenue in the early days, this is the first storefront of the Hare Krishna movement. So Prabhupada was given a class on the Bhagavad Gita that was written and translated by one man in India. And in this particular commentary, this commentator was saying, well, it's not Krishna who you surrendered to. It's the eternal, unborn within Krishna. In other words, Krishna's impersonal. There's no personhood. So Prabhupada was explaining that, no, this is wrong. This is incorrect. Krishna's a person. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And one of his students in the audience, Keith, he stood up and he raised his hand and he said, well, Swamiji, wait a second. And then he started quoting a bunch of people, Spinoza and Buddha and the big list of people. And saying how this commentator, he was saying to Srila Prabhupada that, oh, this commentator is right. Actually, it is the unborn, eternal within Krishna. It's not Krishna the person. So Prabhupada was hearing this and he was saying, are you done yet? And then, Keith, he kept on going. And are you done yet? And he kept on going with his impersonal ramblings. Are you done yet? And then eventually Keith said, yes, I am. And then Prabhupada said it, Hayagriva writes in the Hare Krishna Explosion, he said that Srila Prabhupada stood up on his seat, on his asana. He stood up, and he said his face became very red. And then the devotees said they felt like a lion just pounced on the asana. And then Prabhupada started to raise his voice. And he said that it shook the whole storefront. This is how it was being described. And he said, no. He said, it's Krishna. It's Krishna. Why are you trying to take it away from Krishna? It's Krishna. Krishna's a person. They become very angry. And then Srila Prabhupada, he just ended the talk and then he just walked out. And then everybody was looking at Keith like, oh, he's kind of like an outcast, or what happened? Because usually he was quite on point, they thought. So, and this is natural. I mean, if we love someone, we won't let them be criticized. We won't let them be devalued in any way, shape, or form. We'll defend them. Physically, we'll defend them. If somebody's, talking bad about them, we'll defend them. Or at least we'll walk away. We'll do something. We won't be happy about it. We become angry. Like if somebody's saying how terrible your best friend is or something, or how terrible your wife is, you get angry. So Srila Prabhupada, he fully has that pure love for Krishna, and therefore he became angry. So, but yes, we do have to be careful, and it is a science, and over time, you could say our emotions, we are hoping, become spiritualized and purified, and that we could properly engage it for our benefit and the benefit of others. So, all right, thank you. Does anybody have any other question or comment?
No, it's very simple. what do they do if they want to get a copy of the Ramayana Bhakti Vikash Maharaj's? I checked and I think we're out.
Yes.
But if you'd like this, I've read so many versions of the Ramayana, and if you want a condensed version,
Yes.
you know, it's really the best one you can get is by Bhakti Vikash Maharaj. And if you check with Balaram, I think they're like $10, $12, and it's got pictures. It's just a first-class copy. So take home this memory with you, and you just check with Balaram, give him your phone number or email address. We're going to pick up a case anyway. And, if you change your mind later on, but give your name and address, your name or your email or phone number, and when they're in, we can call you, and if you still want one, come by and pick it up. I highly recommend it. People spend more of that on Starbucks or I don't know what, on cable.
Yeah.
Pick up Ramayana. Hare
Yeah.
Krishna.
Great
So
investment.
give your number to Balaramji. You're not obliged, just give him your name.
Okay, we have Pavamana Prabhu here. We have he's running the mic over to you. It's easier for me and everybody.
I'm just curious what you think of the version which was written by Krishna Dharma.
Krishna Dharma. What do I think of the version that was written by Krishna Dharma?
I have that.
Well, to tell you the truth, which I should tell you the truth, I haven't read that one, but I have read this other one Maharaj is describing, his Bhakti Vikash Swami's book, and yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, I don't know so much about that one.
They're both okay. I find that people like they're both very nice. They're done from a pure. Well, people forget the mind. They're done from a pure heart, with a coming in a bona fide line of, guru teacher. So it's a bona fide presentation. It's very nice. I just find that the other one people tend to like more, but both are fine.
Yeah, it is more condensed, that's for sure. Bhakti Vikash Swami. The other ones,
Yes, yes.
That's
Yeah.
my experience
Yes, okay.
from what people tell me.
yeah. All right. Any last thing before we close this session, if you want to say? Okay, so I'd like just to say a little announcement. Is that we have Asha here, and she's right here by the. Maybe you could raise your hand. Yeah. So Ori, so her husband Ram. So it's a good day to think about. He passed away some time ago. So Asha, she sponsored the feast tonight in remembrance of Ram. So yeah, if everybody could just shower their good wishes and blessings upon her and her family. And yeah, thank her for sponsoring. So. A long-time member of the congregation here, very kind soul, Asha. I think you had something, Maharaj?
I was just going to add that in my duty to make sure standards are maintained here at the temple, I did check out the prasadam, and it's first class. So please, because of the whole COVID and social distancing, we can't all take prasadam here. But are they setting up outside?
Yeah, there's to-go boxes.
Have these to-go boxes, and it's first class, excellent prasadam. So please, we will feel very badly if you don't go home with 3 or 4 boxes. Okay? So just pick it up on the way out.
And there's a nice sweet box. There's a box full of sweets, and then there's a box full of other items. So, anyways, yeah, it's good.
But get both?
Yeah, both. Yeah, take both. Yeah. All right. Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.